Another episode of Driving It Home with the Professor. This is a different format than we're used to. I have with me today Brad Court, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, owner of Paramount Jiu-Jitsu. I believe it's in Exton, PA, but he could correct me if I'm wrong on that. Brad and I are friends for many years. He is a very high-level competitor, good good friend, but also an excellent instructor, running a great school out there in Exton, PA. One thing that if you know Brad a little bit, you know that he is a jiu-jitsu fiend. He loves jiu-jitsu. There is no doubt in my mind that he is, a quote-unquote jiu-jitsu man. That's why we have him on today. He and I will be talking about what many consider a very famous match that occurred at Metamoris 2, I believe, between Andre Galvao, multiple-time world champion, and Ryron Gracie, a member, obviously, of the Gracie family. So I will let Brad introduce himself and let everybody out there in YouTube land know why they should respect him as an expert.
Thanks, Marco. Paramount Jiu-Jitsu is actually in Downingtown, PA, but that's like 5 minutes from Exton, so right near Westchester. Well, I started training Jiu-Jitsu in 1997. I got my black belt in 2007, and I've competed at, I think, every major tournament, the Worlds, the Pan, Brasileiro, all at every belt, like Brasileiro and Worlds, just brown and black belt. But yeah, I've been training for a long time, spent a bit of time in Brazil, and I'm big on competition, but I'm big on jiu-jitsu in general, pretty much all aspects.
So that the people at home know, your school's not just a jiu-jitsu school, though. You have a very robust boxing, kickboxing, and MMA program if they're interested in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a former IBF featherweight world champion, Calvin Grove, teaching boxing, and we have Justin Greskowitz, who just won the WMA U.S. title for Muay Thai and just won his fight in K1 in China, teaching Muay Thai. So yeah, we're very fortunate to have some very, very high-level instructors.
Now, from your personal experience, and it's kind of like a little bit of an interview, but I want to give the fans some context. What would you say is the biggest tournament that you've minimally at least placed in or possibly even won? And at what level did that occur?
I'd probably say the Pan Am 2012. I did the Master Division, and I got bronze. And it was a pretty good field. So I'm proud of that, even though it's not a gold medal. I guess that would probably be the biggest.
Okay.
When I can.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was gonna say when I competed in Brazil at brown belt, I did the Worlds, and I got to the third round there. But that division was huge. And then the Brasileiro, I got to the quarterfinals, but lost there to Michael Lange.
So what people may not understand, especially when these tournaments are that big, and you could correct me if I'm wrong because you've competed way more than I have. But when you're competing in Brazil, it's not like not like you might catch a scrub or whatever. But when you're at the brown and black level competing in Brazil, every guy you're going up against is hungry for it. Secondly, doesn't want to lose to an American, and thirdly, is probably pretty damn good.
Yeah. All my matches down there were really, really tough. I think overall, because actually I did the Copa do Mundo too the same year I did the Worlds. I don't know. I had probably like a dozen matches altogether. And yeah, there was never an easy match. They were really, really tough.
Okay, so that the fans at home have that context. You've competed all over the world, Brazil, United States, and in all the big tournaments with the gi. Anyway, I mean, have you ever competed without the gi?
Actually, no, I haven't. I guess I just fell in love with the gi right away, and I didn't want to spend any time without it. I do train without the gi, but probably like 90% gi.
Okay. All right. So let's get into the debate. This all stems from a conversation that Brad and I had a few weeks ago when we got done training, where we were talking about this Metamoris match between Galvao and Ryron Gracie, and I thought that this would be a great topic for the fans and jiu-jitsu nerds, but also people that don't understand the martial arts. It would be a good opportunity for them to hear two people that many consider experts in the field kind of break down the match, talk about different things. And I approached Brad about it, and he's kind enough to take time out of his day of teaching and spending time with his family and all this other stuff to talk to everybody. So again, I thank you. So let's get to the history of this, right? So Metamoris is promoted by Halleck Gracie, Elio Gracie's grandson, and it's promoted as a submission only, but with a time limit. Is that correct, Brad?
Yes, yes, submission only or draw after 20 minutes.
At one point they did have, or for one event they had like a judging system, but I think that was kind of nixed, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Huron and Galvao match was the first Metamoris, and in the second one they had judges, but the judges were ruling for draws in a couple of matches anyway, so it was kind of weird.
Okay, all right. So that was a mistake. I mean, I wasn't sure if it was the first or the second Metamoris, but regardless. So Huron, not Huron, but Halleck. It feels like, and I really haven't done too much research into why he started Metamoris, but I got the feeling is that they were trying to recapture that glory of almost inventing or bringing jiu-jitsu to the United States and showcasing a style and a type of jiu-jitsu that maybe has never been showcased in the States. What were your thoughts on why they brought out why they started doing Metamoris?
Well, my initial thought was that it was a Gracie marketing thing. I don't know if that was Halleck's intention or if that was Huron's goal of going into it. But yeah, that was my first impression, was that it was just marketing.
All right. So now, but I tell you, I don't know how you felt, Brad, but I ordered the Metamoris. I watched it on my iPad. It was phenomenal. I hadn't been that excited to watch a pay-per-view event since back when I was ordering like UFC number 3, 4, and 5 when I wanted to watch Royce Gracie. What was your level of excitement when you watched the first Metamoris?
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of great matchups, and it was a totally different. There was a different vibe than like the IBJJF tournaments. Yeah, it was very exciting.
Yeah, so you definitely, I think you got your money's worth with that one. So let's talk about the history of these two competitors and kind of the teams that they stem from. We'll start with Andre Galvao, and he's kind of been on a few different teams in his career, right? You might be better suited to give people an explanation of this, but if I'm not mistaken, he was with Alliance, which is Fabio Gurgel's team, and then there was always seems to happen. I don't know. That's like a podcast for a whole nother day, is how Alliance continues to stay so strong when so many guys leave to start other teams, which is kind of amazing. So he went from Alliance. I don't know if he went with Leozinho and then with Terere and then somewhere else and then wound up like starting Atos. Do you know the whole story or maybe a better history of how he got to Atos?
I think that he started with Terere under Alliance, and then he was on the TT team, Terere and Tellus. And then I think he went to Braza, and then
was Braza at the time Leozinho, or was that something or somebody else? I don't remember.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
And then from Braza,
I think that was when he, I guess, formed Atos along with Ramon Lemos. No.
Okay.
Something like that.
All right. So then, and all of those lineages, right? Alliance, Terere, Braza, to current day Atos. If we were to have to put them in a box, are they sport jiu-jitsu teams or are they self-defense jiu-jitsu teams? What box do you put them in?
I would say sport jiu-jitsu. I mean, I'm not sure what their curriculums are like at the schools, but they're definitely known for sport jiu-jitsu competitors.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue that some of the greatest sport jiu-jitsu competitors of all time, have come from Alliance or an offshoot of Alliance.
Yeah, definitely,
Like,
definitely.
we could go back to Fabio Gurgel, to more recently Marcelo Garcia, to stuff like that. So to give the people watching this some context of where, what's Andre Galvao's history. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that before we jump on to Ryron Gracie?
Not really. I mean, he's just one of those guys that competes, nonstop all the time, and he seems to be a little bit more of an athlete, um, kind of like the next step in the progression of sport jiu-jitsu. It seemed like at first a lot of those guys were just jiu-jitsu fighters, maybe back in the day doing Vale Tudo, and then they would do the sport jiu-jitsu, but it wasn't like it didn't seem like they were like professional athletes. Now a lot of guys are like that. I think Galvao was kind of on the forefront of that, the professional athletes taking it very seriously, and all the conditioning and the Olympic lifting and all that stuff. So yeah, I would consider him like a professional athlete.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make because if we were picking like a football team, who would we take first? Andre Galvao or Ryron Gracie? Probably, if they had their shirts off, you're going to take not Ryron, but Andre Galvao because of what you're saying. He seems to be more, not that he's a better athlete than Ryron. That we could argue that point later, but he presents himself as somebody that could probably pick up a sport pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I saw him do one of the most dynamic things ever, almost from his knees, jump into a flying triangle. It was, it was like, that's just amazing. Um, so now, well, let's go to Huron Gracie. Why don't you, I talked enough about Galvao. What's your knowledge of his team, his history, his lineage?
Well, Huron Gracie's a son of Horian Gracie, who kind of co-created the UFC, and I don't know. I would guess he's competed less than a dozen times. You rarely see or hear anything about him competing through all the ranks. Um, his background is definitely more of the self-defense, and he's more of an instructor as opposed to a competitor. And I think that's his main goal, his main focus is teaching jujitsu.
It's kind of funny because his dad, Horian, right, and obviously Elio's son. But Horian has some brothers that you would say are as much about competing as they were about self-defense. Helson competed a lot and fought a lot, as we know. Hickson, who's probably the most, uh, what's the word I'm looking for, like deified Gracie of all time, fought and competed. Hoyler Gracie, up until probably Hodger, was the most accomplished competitor in that family. So it was kind of interesting to see, Horian's children not take that same kind of path and road.
Yeah, I guess I mean because Horian wasn't really a big competitor, so I guess that his approach was just different, and how he raised him and how he brought him up.
I know, and I've been watching like almost every Hickson interview that's come out recently, and one of the things that he said about Horian is that Horian was his kind of his watermark for what a good instructor was. Like if you wanted to teach and you wanted to be a good teacher, watch Horian. And that kind of seems like I know you have watched those Gracie breakdowns. Those guys break a move down and have like a high level of technical proficiency, unlike anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. A student of mine actually has some of their DVDs, and I borrowed and watched it. And they have a very, very extensive and detailed curriculum. I was really impressed. I know a lot of people knock them for the online academy and the belt promotions online and stuff, and that's a whole other issue. But their curriculum itself was really impressive.
Yeah, and those guys, like and we'll put links in the description for anybody that kind of doesn't have access to what we're talking about. But I watched them on YouTube doing an instructor training that was just amazing on how they really were really pushing to make sure that the student at least one time got the technique 100% correct by actually pushing them and manipulating their body into the position that they needed to be in. And it seems so simple of an idea, but something that a lot of instructors don't grasp, that telling somebody jiu-jitsu is way harder to take in as opposed to kind of positioning themselves into that. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you that those guys are amazing, amazing instructors. So now let's get into some of the, like the big argument today in the jiu-jitsu community is sport jiu-jitsu versus self-defense jiu-jitsu. And in your mind, Brad, what do you think are the kind of the key differences when people talk about, oh, I'm a sport jiu-jitsu guy or I'm a self-defense jiu-jitsu guy?
Well, first and foremost, the idea of points. I think that the points in jiu-jitsu and sport jiu-jitsu are designed to reflect important techniques or positions, and that's a good thing. But like anything, competitors learn how to manipulate the points or manipulate the system, and as they do that, it kind of deviates from the jiu-jitsu philosophy or original philosophy. And so the two over time have kind of branched off, and there's a lot of differences.
So when we kind of, like, if someone were to walk into say a sport-oriented jiu-jitsu school as opposed to a self-defense oriented jiu-jitsu school, what do you think would be the main differences for a beginner from a learning perspective?
I mean, obviously the specific techniques at a self-defense geared jiu-jitsu school, you're going to be learning about confrontations on the street, how to deal with aggressors on the street, people who may do things that aren't correct in the jiu-jitsu world, but common reactions from a person on the street who's trying to attack you. Whereas in a sport jiu-jitsu school or a class geared towards sport jiu-jitsu, you're learning about grips, how to wrap the person up with a lapel, how to score points. So everything, the techniques, the vocabulary, everything's different between the two.
So I know your school is on the local scene, but on the international scene as well, has had a very high level of success. But I know that from my understanding and just talking to you and all this other stuff, your beginners get punches thrown at them. They get thrown in, not going to say thrown into the fire, but they're learning the self-defense, correct, in a way that's practical, but also doesn't detract from being competitors as well. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Absolutely. My beginners are not getting punches thrown at them.
Simulated strikes. I'm sorry. They're not getting punched in the face, but they're learning where openings are, where they could get hit, where they shouldn't get hit, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, as opposed to never having that conversation.
Right. Absolutely. I try in our basics curriculum, very little grips on the sleeves and things like that. They're in there, but yeah, definitely geared more towards how to defend yourself in a real life, self-defense situation in 2015. So yeah, there's simulated strikes, how to close the distance and clinch, how to take the person to the ground, how to defend yourself if you're on bottom against punches, against headbutts, and so on.
And what I've seen, and that's the way I came up in jiu-jitsu, and I know that's the way you came up in jiu-jitsu, and I think that really informs us as instructors, but also, you more so as a competitor. Not that when you're competing, you're thinking, oh, well, there's a position he can punch me in, but your jiu-jitsu is grounded in a solid set of fundamentals, and that's why I think that having that self-defense base is super important.
Yeah, 100% agree. All of my students learn that stuff first, and then we get into the competition side of it or the fun side of it, just rolling and stuff after that.
I think the best way I've heard this, the difference between sport jiu-jitsu and self-defense jiu-jitsu, I had thought this, but I'm going to attribute it to Henry Akins when I had a conversation with Scotty from On the Mat, where he says there was a time where jiu-jitsu, you were only training jiu-jitsu to defeat someone from another martial art or a street fighter. But now a lot of people are strictly training jiu-jitsu to defeat other jiu-jitsu guys, and that's where the deviation comes. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that, but it definitely makes sense. Um, and I think jiu-jitsu guys training to go up against other jiu-jitsu guys is not a good way to learn self-defense, because the majority of people don't know jiu-jitsu. They're not going to do the things that you're going to see with another jiu-jitsu student. They're going to do things that are unorthodox, that are wrong, and I think that's why it's so important to learn that self-defense aspect of it. You can be, you know, good at sport jiu-jitsu, and you're gonna be trained and programmed to do things that are very dangerous out in the street.
Now those are some really good insights for people that may be training at a sport only school or have never been exposed to the self defense. And I know there's a lot of people that kind of think, well, you don't need it, or a high level jiu-jitsu guy is to some degree equipped. But I think the big difference is realizing where the punches can come from at a degree, getting at some point as you get better, going live with some punches, being able to kind of see where that is, and kind of saying, all right, this is where the mistake is. Why? Because I did get hit in the face, head, body, like I not ate a kick, but in a safe, controlled environment. Those are the things that need to happen. So now let's move on from the differences of sport and self-defense and curriculum and all that other stuff, and let's talk. And you touched upon it a little bit earlier. The athletes themselves, the martial artists that we're talking about today, Andre Galvao and Ryron Gracie. And one of the things you said about Andre Galvao is there's a guy that's a real athlete that takes his training seriously, like someone that would be if they're trying out for the U.S. Olympic team to a certain degree, or wants to be in the NFL, or is a college football player. What is from your knowledge, what is Andre's background competitively? What are the things that you think he's good at? Why is Andre the man as much as he is?
I know that Galvao has won the world at purple belt 2003, and on from there, brown belt, black belt, multiple time black belt world champion. I think as far as what he's good at, I mean, he's good everywhere, but he seems to be more of a top guy, take down, pass the guard, and submit from there. When he works his guard, he tends to sweep, not a lot of submissions from guard usually. So definitely take down and pass, submit kind of guy.
And he not only is he a gi competitor, but ADCC world champion as well. And I believe, I'm not sure if he won the absolute or not, but I know he's a high level no gi submission wrestler as well.
Yeah, he won the ADCC, both his weight and the open weight, and then he had the super fight with Braulio, who was the previous absolute champion, and he submitted Braulio, who's another multiple-time world champion.
And also, Galvao has fought MMA. I think he's got a decent record, maybe 7-2, 6-1. I know, I know he has a loss to Tyron Woodley, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think that's his only loss.
Right, but it seemed like he stuck his toe into MMA for 6 or 7 fights and just decided that jiu-jitsu was a better avenue for him. But even though, as much as he might be a sport jiu-jitsu guy, hey man, like that cage is real, right? I mean, he's not just one of those sport jiu-jitsu guys that's never had a punch thrown in his face. So we don't want people to think that he's just a galaxy guard kind of spider guard guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's, like you said, he's good in the gi. He's good without the gi. He did well in MMA, so he's definitely very well rounded in his jiu-jitsu.
All right, so now let's flip it and talk about Ryron Gracie. I'll kind of just go into what I think probably is his best attribute, and I'm not even going to say like because there's not that much video out there like you would say of Galvao. He doesn't have the accolades that Galvao has. I do recall him. If not, I believe it was Ryron did some super fights. Mark Lehman, Camarillo, not Camarillo, Cameron Earl. Rick McCauley. Are those correct, Brad? Did he do super fights or was that Henner?
I know Huron competed against Mark Lehman.
Okay.
I know he had a super fight at the SoCal Pro-Am against Todd Margolis.
Okay.
There was an event that he and Henner did with I think Jeff Munson, David Avalon, and some other guys. It was never released because I don't think they won.
Right.
But
He lost to Avalon in that one. Is that correct? That's when Avalon beat him.
I believe so. I know both he and Henner both lost, but I don't recall the exact matches.
So regardless, so I mean, we can kind of look into what his competitive history is, but there's not a lot of video out there in him actively competing. Now that's no reflection on how good his jiu-jitsu is, but I mean, we only know what we know. You know, what there is a lot of video out there, and which is kind of his strongest suit is I think his unbelievable understanding of jiu-jitsu, human movement, technique, and also teaching. So if I had to say, what is Huron's best quality is probably, his understanding of jiu-jitsu. What would you say, Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. You referred to earlier their Gracie breakdowns, and you can see in there that, yeah, he has an incredible, a vast knowledge of, like you said, the intricacies of jiu-jitsu and the body movement and everything. Yeah, I would say, going back, his main focus is on instruction, so he has very, very in-depth knowledge.
So let's get into the match itself. Now, there was some kind of, idea of why Ryron went up against Galvao. We don't need to get into it, whatever, if there's any kind of, problem between the sport world versus the Gracie self-defense world. But, why do you think Ryron wanted to do this first Metamoris?
I think that his goal was to show that you can use simple, basic jiu-jitsu techniques, self-defense, or even whatever, just defense, against a more athletic, perhaps more experienced, or I guess more athletic, explosive, stronger, whatever. You can defend yourself against that kind of a person, even if you're not an athlete, even if you have a physique like his. He's just a tall, skinny guy, not particularly muscular or anything. I think that was his goal, to show that you don't have to be an athlete to do jiu-jitsu and to be good at jiu-jitsu.
Okay, and why do you think Galvao took the match?
I would guess that he just wanted to try something a little different. He obviously loves to compete, and maybe he saw it as a unique challenge. I don't know that he's competed against a Gracie other than Hodger, so maybe that there was an appeal there.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you on both points. I definitely will say that if I had to speak for Andre Galvao, which I'm not, but he took it because that's what he does. That's what he lives for. Competition is his life, and this was just another avenue for him to prove to himself or to whomever that his brand and style and training are the right way, and kind of like he can go into any modality and do well, because he proved that he can win in the gi. He proved that he can win no gi. He could prove that he could do well in MMA. Now he's like, okay, you know what? I can win under your rule set as well. So that's why I kind of give him some props and respect for taking the match, because my understanding was a lot of people turned the match down based upon the rules and the opponent. So going into the match, we were very clear on what Ryron's conversation was with the public. Why don't you expand on that a little bit? What was Ryron telling everybody before the match?
Are you referring to his keep it playful?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's big on not worrying about getting tapped, not focusing on winning, focusing on learning, putting yourself in every position possible, having fun with it, um, and again just learning jujitsu and not necessarily worrying about winning. I know uh, he mentioned somewhere maybe in the lead up to the match or in the post match interview something about maybe I get tapped, so what? At the end of the day, it's not a big deal. Um, so that's kind of his his approach to it.
Yeah, I definitely can't argue. I can't argue with that. Those were all things that I took from any conversation that he was having prior to the match. Now Galvao, I don't think there was too much out on what his reasons were, or all this other stuff. It was really more centered. It felt like it was a little more Huron centered about. He was talking about, I just want to see how well I'm going to do against this monster of Andre Galvao, and kind of putting it out there ahead of time that this was his goal set. Now let's get into the match, and this is where we've agreed a lot up until pardon me, probably now, right? Um, and we can look at this match from a few different hats of perspective. We can look at it from the fan that paid $20 to an active jiu-jitsu competitor to a coach and school owner. And you could pick whichever one kind of what your whole idea is. But our conversation that we had off the mat was like, I was unimpressed with Huron in the sense of I felt like he didn't do enough in the match. I felt like regardless of what his conversation was with the public ahead of time, he owed me something for the $20 that I paid. And I rewatched the match with the sound down because I didn't want to have Henner in my ear telling me how good his brother is. And his brother's Huron's phenomenal. We're not going to argue that point. As so is Galvao. But after watching it again, literally 5 minutes, it ended. My second watching of it ended 5 minutes before we came online here. Again, unimpressed with his tactics as a fan. Unimpressed with his ability to attack, and I know this might be counter to what you thought. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean I watched it a couple hours ago too, and yeah, I mean my thoughts haven't really changed either. Um, it's funny because the first time I watched it, I would have agreed with everything you said. Um, I thought it was lame. Coming from my background of competition, I like the IBJJF rule set. I've competed at the IBJJF since 2000, the Pan American. So I kind of came from that perspective of a guy that, wants to see two guys go head to head in battle and really just go for it. But over time, I kind of took a different, I saw it from a different perspective. I saw it kind of from like my average student that walks into the academy who just wants to learn how to defend themselves. And there are a good number of people in my school who aren't particularly athletic. They're just everyday people, and they're not looking to crush people. They're looking to learn the techniques in jiu-jitsu that drew me in, how a smaller person can survive and defend against or defeat a bigger person. So yeah, my perspective on it changed, and I do really appreciate what Huron was able to do. And I took a little bit of notes today on kind of what happened and as the match went on, which we can get into.
No, definitely for sure. Now, what I will say is that if we were to rate this match like they rate figure skating, then Huron is clearly has much in the match, much more beautiful jiu-jitsu, much more fluid, looks almost hyper flexible, like a yogi out there, the way he moves and how calm and kind of assured of himself that he is. But what I never saw, except for one instance where he didn't keep it playful, is when he went for kind of a footlock, and you could see that look on his face where it's like, man, I can get this. And it kind of was like, all right, I thought we were just seeing if we were not going to get submitted. Now that you see a submission, all that changes. But for me, paying $20, not that it's a lot of money, but it's still, it's money that goes in their pocket. I thought Huron's responsibility was not to just play for a tie, but to play for the win, and that's what bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that he played for a tie. I think what he says in the pre-fight interview is that he's going to see if he can survive, and once he proves that Galvao can't submit him, he said something, I'm going to move forward, I'm going to go forward. I think when you have a competitor or an athlete of Galvao's caliber, you can't just, I'm going to hang out for 5 minutes and then go full blast. I think that Ryron, I think he felt the match, understood the match better than Galvao. Galvao pushed really hard from the get-go and got tired towards the end. And Ryron, yeah, he took it easy in the beginning, and I think he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He defended himself. He proved that, at least in that match, Galvao couldn't submit him. And then he did go on the attack. Did he go all out? No, but there's several attacks towards the end, foot sweep attacks. He goes for an Ochigari. And towards the end, it's really interesting to see his guard retention, where he's being a lot more active with his gripping, a lot more active with his leg work. I think he did what he said he was going to do.
No, and I agree with you. I think you're right. He did exactly what he said he was going to do, but that's not what, I'm paying to watch a 20-minute submission-only match, and really watching a guy that's not worried. He's telling us from the get-go, I'm not worried about submitting him. I'm worried about defending the submission. So from a technical standpoint, he looked great. And you could see that, at least, and maybe your notes might reflect this, or your recollection reflect this, that, in the beginning, Galvao, you could see Galvao's gripping him and not respecting him. But as it kind of goes on, he doesn't grip him with that level of quote-unquote disrespect. He's gripping him with a lot more respect and moving around him with a lot more respect. Did you kind of get the same feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I think that's why it's so cool to me, is that Ryron, I think, got in Galvao's head by doing what he said he was going to do. He didn't get submitted. He did survive. Galvao was aggressive on top, trying to submit him, and a credit to him for going for it. But I think that Ryron did a better job of pacing himself. And yeah, towards the end, Galvao, I mean, look, in the last 2.5 minutes, Galvao all of a sudden starts pulling guard. He pulls guard 3 times. He's bent over at the waist. He's tired. It's exactly what Ryron wanted. And we could speculate, the match was 20 minutes. Anything could happen past that point. We don't know. But in my opinion, that match was Ryron's if it kept going. And what's interesting to me is, after the match, Galvao wants to do a rematch under his rules, which I would assume is the 10-minute IBJJF match. And when they switch over to talk to Ryron, he says, hey, let's do it for 30 minutes next time. That to me says one guy's looking to win, probably by points, given the fact that I think he realizes how tough it will be to submit Ryron. He'd rather get a takedown and pass and win on 5 points or whatever. And Ryron does want to get that submission. He just realizes that it takes more time.
So you're saying is you don't think Ryron had enough time to submit Andre Galvao?
In my opinion, I think that if the match continued, I think that it hit a point where I think Galvao started to believe that he couldn't tap Ryron either. I think it got to a point where they both realized, not that he couldn't, but that it was going to be a bit harder than he first thought.
But I mean, my counter argument to that is that if Ryron were to truly compete against Galvao under the rule set, not accepting a point loss, right? Trying to make points to win and understanding that, man, if I'm down 6-0, I need to open up and all this other stuff. It can give Galvao greater opportunities for submission as
Right.
opposed to just laying there and just kind of like, all right, I got my guard pass. I'm going to sit here for the next 7 minutes and lose 3-0.
No, and he says that at the end of the match. Huron says, maybe if we did a points match, you would beat me on points. He says something to the effect of, or maybe I would make a mistake and give my back to avoid the points. He's clearly against that rule system for that reason. He believes that it's that people that jiu-jitsu competitors make technical errors to avoid points, and I agree that oftentimes they do. We see even at the black belt level, guys give their back to avoid the pass. More often than not, they lose, and oftentimes they lose by submission. So some people look at that like, look, that's the sport. You got to fight hard. You can't let people score on you. And as a competitor, I still compete, and my students compete. Not the majority of them, but a good number of them compete. I'm not okay with someone saying, I lost, but it was only 2-0. I lost, but it was only 3-0.
Right, or he didn't submit me. You'll hear that a lot. Oh, I didn't get subbed,
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of that stuff. But I don't think people should give their back. I don't think people should fight so hard to avoid the points that they demonstrate poor jiu-jitsu.
No, I mean, I think those are all strong points, but you can kind of look, what was really telling to me in this match, right, and you could see the difference in kind of fighting spirit is when they pan to Kron with about a minute left, and he's banging on the mat, telling his cousin, go, do something, try and win the match. I'm not saying that Huron wasn't trying to win it, but damn it, I bet you Kron would have been going harder and really trying for the sub as opposed to what Huron did.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I think Huron was really going for it towards the end, but his style is different. Kron is definitely more aggressive, but he also does do more of sport jiu-jitsu, so he has a little more of that, a kind of a mix, I think. He does lose sometimes by points. He does get scored on, but he does have more of a sport jiu-jitsu approach. So he's going to be more aggressive, I think, than Huron, for sure.
Right, but I think he, like, what was it, the Curious Crace of Kron, the BJJ Scout, or one of those guys that does breakdowns where it's like, Kron only plays closed guard. Closed guard, quote, he doesn't play De La Hiva for the most part. He doesn't play spider guard. He doesn't play half guard. He plays closed guard, which you would think, well, that's not going to work for him, but in a sport, idea, he's done extremely, extremely well, winning, I think his highest accolade was winning the ADCC. So you can take that self-defense oriented approach and still make it work, because Kron did make it work against Otavio Souza. I think it was the same day.
Yeah, but I mean they have different styles too. I mean, I think Kron is more of an athlete than Huron. I think he's.
I could definitely. I'll give you that. Yeah.
I think that Kron is closer to Galvao than he is to Huron in terms of the style. He does have a basic jiu-jitsu style, but he's a competitor. He does the IBJJF. He's going to have that more aggressive style.
All right. So Kron obviously is a different fighter, different competitor. But the things you were talking about is like what Huron did in the match. Like I watched him get his guard passed. I don't know if it was 4 or 5 times maybe to a cross-side position, having a really difficult time getting to that one position where you thought he'd be able to get, which was closed guard. And the one time he got the closed guard, he got his guard split and pass again. Not beautifully, but Galvao showed that we could flip the argument. You put me in closed guard, you couldn't even keep me there.
I don't know that his goal was to get closed guard. I don't think that it necessarily was.
Well, I mean, then I don't know what his goal was. I mean, just to sit there and get pinned.
No, I think
like if he was on bottom, then what was his? Where was he going to go?
I think his goal was to to demonstrate. I can like, look. He doesn't. He starts off the match practically walking towards him with his hands down. He clearly is not taking the same approach. He's not. I think he's looking to. I'm gonna let you take me down. I'm gonna let you pass my guard. I'm gonna move around and see if I can recover without expending too much energy. And over the course of the match, I'm going to start to pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. Once you realize you can't tap me, and I'm going to break you, and like mentally, and then I'm going to catch you. I don't think that he was looking for close guard. I think he was trying to be on bottom, look to escape. And yes, Galvao passed his guard a few times, but around the 8-minute mark, 8:40 with 8:40 left. Sorry, with 8:40 left. That's the last time that Galvao passes. Now he gets really aggressive over the next few minutes trying to repass, and he can't. Ryron's starting to really get serious about his guard retention, and that's where Galvao starts to get really tired. And that's why I think that he wasn't just laying there. He took that first half of the match, I'm going to prove you can't tap me, and then I'm going to start to pick it up gradually. And like I said,
if your point is that Ryron didn't want close guard as part of his strategy, I don't know at the minute mark, but the one time where they get back to the feet again, what does he do? He jumps close guard. So that indicates to me that close guard was a position that he wanted to be in.
Well, Galvao jumps close guard too. I mean, he jumped guard. I'm not saying that he didn't want close guard or that wasn't part of his strategy.
Wait. You said a minute ago that you didn't think that was part of his strategy.
No. To me, you were saying that was his main goal, his number one goal. I'm saying I don't know that that's true. Close guards can be part of anyone's strategy. I got the impression you were saying that was his goal, get close guard.
Well, I think, right, is if we were to look at the teaching style, right, and if Ryron were teaching somebody that they were on bottom against a bigger opponent, what's the first thing that he would teach him to do?
Well, I think you're trying to get me to say close guard.
Oh, I don't know. I just want whatever answer you want. But I mean, like, if you were in his class, what would he be teaching a beginner to do against a bigger, stronger opponent?
I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that. I could take a guess, and I think that.
Well, that's what I mean. You know, we're billing ourselves as experts, but a lot of this is, you know, we're taking leaps of faith because we're talking for other people. So yeah, go for it.
For sure. I think their philosophy is very much. It depends on the scenario, right? I know they teach to wrap up the head, wrap up the arm, and keep the person really close. But I know they also teach to kick away and stand up, which they both guys do in the match. They if they're on bottom, they don't want to be on bottom. They stand up. So I think it's that classic take what they give me type of thing.
Right. So I'm not buying the fact and that he's like, hey, take me down past my guard. I don't care. Like I just like I have a tough time accepting that.
I'm not. I mean, to me, it seems obvious. When Galvao's gripping him, Ryron gets the right hand grip, and his left hand is just dangling there. He's standing straight up, and Galvao hits that kind of kochi from the fake Seo setup, throws the legs right by it. There's no attempt to retain the guard, and in contrast, the second half of the match, like I said, with 8:40 left and on, Galvao cannot pass. So it's not like Ryron all of a sudden had good guard retention. He just didn't care in the beginning.
Right, but I mean, he retained an open guard, and then they got to their feet, and then that's where Galvao used what we would consider Ryron's strategies. Like, I'm going to pull, right? I'm going to jump guard. I'm not going to let you take me down, and then I'm going to fight from here. And any offense that Ryron had in the last 3 minutes was based off of the failed sweep attempts to improve position by Galvao. So I think we can agree that the match is definitely open, at least for us as two friends, a good channel of communication, and like seeing a match differently, but being able to argue it and not get mad at each other, which has been great. I definitely understand your points. I still don't agree with you from the first time we talked about this, but I think I'm going to go back to the match and look at it with some of the new data that you've kind of given me, or new insight that you've kind of applied. So in closing, thank you for kind of having this conversation with me. But do you have anything you'd like to add before we end it?
Regarding the match itself, or
The match itself, or whatever you'd like to, the match, and then anything else you'd like to kind of let the world know about.
I think we pretty much covered it during the, as far as the match goes. It's clear that I'm right and you're wrong, and I think that's pretty much it.
That's the beauty of editing. It's really gonna paint you in a poor light. But no, I think this was a good conversation. I respect both of those guys immensely. So that's another thing, and I would watch those guys go at it again.
No, for sure, and obviously I was joking there. I agree with a lot of the things you said. I think it really we're just kind of coming from just a slightly different spot. I don't even think it's that much different. I mean, you're clearly. I've seen your white belt, I guess, stripe testing, and there's a lot of self-defense stuff in there. So I know that you have the big picture view of jiu-jitsu also. So I don't think that we're coming from too far away. We're not on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. I agree with a lot of things you're saying. I think we just kind of maybe just as fans, we're just, like I said, you were looking for, or like you said, you were looking for something different out of the match. And what's funny is I was initially too. I just
because how cool would it have been if Ryron would have submitted him? He would have been, it would have been like, yes, they're right,
Yeah, for sure. But here's the thing, like I think that Galvao is better than Ryron offensively. If you took their offense, like you said, and towards the end, Galvao jumps guard, and like I said, he jumps guard 3 times in 2.5 minutes. And when they are on their feet, he's bent over at the waist. I do encourage the listeners or viewers to watch it. I also watched it with the sound off because, yeah, clearly Henner is biased. So I didn't want to. I really went into it trying to be as objective as possible.
Yeah, I also went into it trying to think, what, maybe Brad's right. And when I watched it again, I was like, no, he's not.
Well, but what I was going to say is, so Galvao is better offensively than Ryron is offensively, but Ryron, I think, is better defensively. In other words, I don't think that Galvao could confidently let Ryron take him down and pass his guard. I think Galvao would give his back. I think Galvao would make what I would consider like a technical error to avoid points.
I think you're right. I think you're 100% right, but Ryron has to do that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's probably the only way he submits Galvao is to pressure him and put offense on him and kind of, I think. Go ahead.
But I think that he would have to if there was no time limit, and I think that's what he would want. I think this is my opinion. I think that if someone came up with the money, and I guess it depends on how much, but Ryron versus Galvao rematch, no time limit. I think Ryron would jump at it. Maybe not now. He feels like he proved his point, but I think he would be more interested in it than Galvao would. I think that maybe coming into it with a different approach, Galvao would it would look different. But again, I think a person watching it objectively can see that Galvao is starting to fatigue. He's starting to get tired, and I think if that continued, it can only go one way. Ryron can pick it up. He can.
Right, but I mean, we almost end. It's like every time I get out, they pull me back in. It's like The Godfather 3, but he got tired at the end of a 20-minute match because that's what he trained for that output. If it was just like back in the day when in the UFC, it's like, okay, well, what was the analogy they used? Throw me in Steve Maxwell used to talk about this. Throw me in the ocean and tell me that you'll be back in 5 minutes and I can tread water. Throw me in the ocean, tell me you'll be back in an hour and I could tread water for an hour. Throw me in the ocean and tell me you don't know when you're coming back. Well, then that's when it starts to get scary. So I don't think that Ryron can beat him under any time limit because he's that good of Galvao's that good of an athlete to prepare for that time limit. Unless you take the time limit away, then that's where Ryron has his chance.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I'm not. When I say if the match continues, yeah, you're right. Galvao prepared for 20 minutes. And I want to say one thing because a lot of the people who are arguing, on the forums, on Facebook, everywhere, there's that urge to say, well, he won or he would have won. And I'm not saying that. This is just my opinion when I say I think it would have gone this way. People said it with the Eddie Bravo and Royler Gracie rematch. Well, Eddie Bravo would have won on points if it was a point.
Right.
Match.
I mean, that's a BS way of looking at it.
Right. And so I said it, but I'm hesitant to say, if it had gone on because yeah, you're right. Galvao would have prepared differently if it were no time limit. Just based on what I saw, I feel like Ryron prepared and approached the match and performed in the match better than Galvao in terms of like big picture jiu-jitsu.
Right, and what I will add is that I think, and I thought you were going to make this point, but Ryron prepared or competed like there was no time limit. You know what I'm saying? Like that was, he's just like, okay, this is just going to go on forever, and it didn't. And that's the part that kind of got me.
I like that. I like that he prepared for no time limit because, well, I do think that he attacked a little bit towards the end. I do think that he approached it the way he said he would. There's a bigger, stronger professional athlete. I'm not a professional athlete. I'm an instructor. So yeah, I'm gonna approach it as if there is no time limit. I like that, although I can see your point where, yeah, there is a time limit. Let's go for it. I get it.
All right, guys. Well, I'd like to, number one, Brad, thank you for being on. Might be probably the longest driving home I've done, but might be one of the most fun ones. This is a good back and forth. And everyone, Brad Court, my defeated opponent.
Come on.
Only kidding, guys. You guys take from it what you want. I appreciate Brad being on. Anybody that's listening or watching this whole thing now, Brad, anything going on with you professionally or at your school that people should be knowing about? Any special events coming up, or things they should know what's going on in the new year at Paramount in 2015?
Yeah, I mean we do a free trial. We have the Muay Thai, boxing, Jiu-Jitsu. We're right in Downingtown, which is pretty much the heart of Chester County. And of course, I welcome anyone to come in, check us out, try out a class. As far as the competition side, I'm taking a pretty good sized team to the Atlanta Open at the end of the month, and I'll be competing again, which I haven't done since summer of 2013. I tore the ACL, MCL, meniscus early last year, so I've been out for a while. So I'm excited to get back out there and compete under the IBJJF rules, along with a bunch of my students. So, yeah, man, I'm excited.
All right, awesome. Well, good luck to your team. Good luck to you. And again, thanks for being on.
Thank you, Marco. I appreciate it.